Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, September the 5th, 2025, and today we're talking about black widows and other spiders you don't want biting you that are in the garden. We're talking about being a good ethical boss, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, how about that tune? That cover of the theme song was sent to us by Nick Riggin, whose work we will link in the show notes. Big shouts to that. And for those of you not watching on YouTube, Nick also gave us a more gothic, sort of metal version of the Growers Daily logo to go along with it, which was awesome. Musicians, please keep sending those covers of the theme song to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. All right, happy Friday, everyone. I hope your all's weeks have gone swimmingly because it's about to get cold, so may as well get all the swimming in you can. I got some kale planted in the tunnel yesterday, along with some carrots for the winter. Slowly just getting that space flipped over and ready for, the cold to come. And kind of excited about it. Seems like it's going so far so good. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we didn't have a show. It was Labor Day, and I was fiddling with irrigation and went to the Kentucky River and then did some soccer practice. However, on Tuesday, we largely focused on ginger. At Robert Cottrell 9810 wrote, quote, "I tried growing ginger last year in Ohio 6B. I got some growth and managed to save some. I started too late last year for anything but a meager harvest. This year, with only what I saved, I have 6 to 8 stalks up and growing in a pot. I got the ginger outside as soon as it was safe, and it's been growing steady ever since. I'm very excited to see how I did this year. Ginger seems like a very easy crop so far," end quote. Indeed, ginger is, all things considered, a relatively easy crop to grow. It just needs a reasonably warm, long season, but I love having those sort of tropical leaves here in the garden just sticking out of the soil here in Kentucky, or in your case, it would be Ohio. Also on the pots thing, at Colleen Rodimer 9497 asked, quote, "Can ginseng be grown in pots or raised beds? If so, can you give a how, etc.? Thanks," end quote. So I don't know about ginseng. That's more of like a forest crop, right? If we're talking about ginger, then yes, at least like 2 to 3 gallon pots with good soil mix and all that stuff. And the watering should be done in the same way that I described on the show. As for ginseng, I'm not so sure that it would grow in pots. I'm not 100% sure it wouldn't, but I've never tried it, and I don't really know if there's much information about growing it in pots. But if anybody has an experience with that, let us know. That could be interesting. And we've grown and helped grow ginseng in the past, so maybe a show on that later on, because it's a great crop, as long as you can keep it protected from people stealing it. That day, I also discussed ways I use garden veggies, and maybe it's worth offering more recipes stuff in the future. It seems like you all were down with that. Especially when I'm talking about a specific crop like ginger. At Heather Naturally mentioned, quote, "I've been growing ginger for a couple years. I harvested so much last year that I still have most of it in the freezer. Yeah, that was not a good idea. It has to be grated, frozen, or you can't even slice the mushy end results of defrosting it," end quote. This is something to keep in mind with fresh ginger. It does freeze well, but it will lose all of its texture. And like they said, you basically can only use it by grating it. Pickling, if you want another preservation option, either hot pickling or kimchi style sort of lactic acid fermentation, is a nice option to retain some of that crunch, though obviously the flavor will change and the crunch will go away as it gets older. But dehydrating the ginger is nice for adding to teas and flavoring stews. You can also dehydrate and powder it if you want. Just make like a nice little ginger powder. As it sits on your counter, it will semi-cure, like you'll see the paper sort of develop, but it won't last as long as actually cured ginger just sitting there on your countertop. But that can get you a little bit more time with it, especially if the rhizomes grew pretty big. But yeah, freezing most anything ruptures the cell wall, so it will be mushy for sure once it thaws. On Wednesday, I mentioned I was saving seed on cherry bomb, and lots of people commented on that. In fact, at Zerel510 asked, quote, "Saving F1 tomato seed, why?" end quote. And the answer is because I'm not really afraid of a little variation in the next generation. You see, an F1 hybrid means that the children will not necessarily be the same as the parents. But it also means there is a lot of genetic variety in that seed that could result in something really cool. So there will be some similarities to the parents, and no doubt you can end up with some meh tomatoes as well, but also some really nice and novel ones. So if I can find the flavor I like in the next generation, then I can breed that seed out and have a more stable version adapted to my conditions here. When we were more intensive in our production, I couldn't really do so much of that. So I think that's part of why people are like, really? Why would you do that? Because I don't don't have to worry about, a few extra cherry tomato plants that maybe aren't as productive or aren't as flavorful now like I used to when every square inch mattered. So now I get to play a little bit more, and I can grow 5 or 10 plants next year and just save the seeds from those cherries that I like the most, and then eventually, stabilize that crop. I've done that with peppers as well. Give yourself a little room to play. You may create something completely new to enjoy. And Top Notch Farms PEI also asked, are you not losing the hybrid properties by saving the cherry bomb tomatoes? End quote. And good question, but the answer is no, not really, because we graft our cherry tomatoes onto hybrid rootstock. So everything's kind of a hybrid in our cherry tomato production. I use several non-hybrid cherries already, in fact. We also talked about winter crops, and I mentioned Muir is known for its heat hardiness. And at Who's Your Pioneer wrote, quote, I thought Muir was for hot weather, but it dies off for me. For what I paid for seed, I expected better results, end quote. Okay, so in terms of summer production, heat hardiness does not, just so it's clear for everyone, does not mean it will produce in the heat without a ton of attention. It just means it will do better in the heat with a ton of attention than other lettuces will. Lettuce, to be sure, does not want to be growing during hot summers, no matter how heat hardy it is. Heat hardy just means it can be encouraged to do so. I don't know what your approach was here, but just a reminder that, for everyone, that lettuce, to be successful in the summer, every single thing has to be done right, or it will be a waste of time and money, no matter what seed you buy. That includes cooling or shading the lettuce and misting, all the things that I've talked about before. In that scenario, Muir will do better than almost any other lettuce in the summer. It is, without question, our best yielding lettuce all summer. But again, it needs TLC, which, now that I'm thinking about it, could stand for tender lettuce care, but it doesn't. It could, though. Then on Thursday, I sized out a mobile wash pack station for a Patreon member, and at DaveJ7458 wrote, quote, if you do settle on a shipping container, be sure to put a 4-foot wide door on the side, halfway or 2/3 of the way to the closed end, and also hang an awning off the side door of the shipping container to give you a flexible work/storage area. A very excellent place for a work/lunch table, end quote. Thanks, and I love that. That all sounds reasonable to me. In fact, an awning can create space for very little cost. I've seen them built off of the side of barns and shipping containers and all sorts of stuff. Simple space creator for sure. That day, we also discussed grass-fed first feedlot beef in terms of its environmental impact. At Florian Lau 6377 added, quote, it might also be good to remember to keep in mind that a cow or any animal is not a magical carbon producing machine. The CO2 or methane that turns into CO2 in 10 years comes from the plants that the cow eats, and the CO2 of the plants is taken out of the atmosphere by the plants. It's a pretty much stable cycle. The only methane/CO2 that is actually produced is by the fossil component that is part of farming. I am not sure how or why this is always overlooked, end quote. And yeah, nothing to really add there necessarily. These elements all exist in cycles, at least until we cut some part of the cycle out, like plow the prairies or level the forests or dump chemicals into the ocean that kills off a lot of the plant life that absorbs the CO2, etc. And then we like to look at the animals as if they're the criminals. I also mentioned that one way grass-fed beef could have negative environmental impacts is transport from other countries, but at Asteria 4279 rightly noted, quote, I'm not sure how beef is shipped to the USA from Australia, but things that are transported via ships have surprisingly low transportation carbon because the ships carry huge amounts very slowly, very efficiently. The raspberries flown just a couple states over will likely have more transportation emissions than boat bananas, end quote. That is fair, and it's often shipped, the beef, via boat in refrigerated containers, which I learned. That seems to take around 5 or so weeks. I don't know what the refrigeration adds to the carbon cost, but beef is often meant to rest for a few weeks in refrigerated temperatures anyway before use, which can help effectively tenderize it. So shipping does kind of both at the same time, which is fascinating. Good stuff. Last, and I know I have to say this every few weeks or so as new people start following to the show, which awesome, but several people have been asking lately about farm tours here, and again, sorry, y'all. We just don't have the time to offer them right now. I honestly barely make it through my to-do list on any one of my days. And although I'm going to try next year to offer some, I'm genuinely just not going to make any promises. Instead, I would just recommend going to, the farmer's market and asking around about touring the farms near you. Ask your local ag organization. For me, the reality is that I work 2 full-time jobs, farming and this show, plus coach 2 soccer teams. And what little time I have left at the end of the day just goes to family. And that's about all any single human can do. So yeah, tours are a kind of a hard fit in there. But I appreciate you all, and maybe one day I'll have more time to do such things. Who knows? But great stuff as always this week in the comments. Best comment section on YouTube, without a doubt. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, treating employees right, BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmhand is the virtual assistant built for farmers, helping CSAs scale sales, run error-free fulfillment, and deliver 5-star service. Whether you're at 100 members or 1,000, Farmhand helps you grow without burning out. You've heard us and our farmers right here on Growers Daily. Explore farmer wins and learn more at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener or watcher, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Papa John Misty, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I have 2 comments questions. The first one is a little more in depth and it may be outside your wheelhouse, but I think it's worth mentioning. I think something that is severely lacking in the small farm community and farming in general is more support for farm workers. I have worked on farms as an employee for a couple of years, and even the best farms have their issues with how labor is treated. The work is very demanding and the pay isn't great. Oftentimes, a living arrangement is incorporated to compensate, but this can force people to stay in bad situations to avoid losing their home. Organizations like NOFA are fantastic at supporting small farmers, but seem to be lacking in helping the farm workers. Even most labor laws have carve-outs for farm workers regarding pay and breaks. UFW tends to focus more on the employees of larger farms, which is, at this moment, especially crucial, but there just doesn't seem to be much for employees of small farms. When thinking about sustainability, I think it's equally important to consider the human capital aspect of running a farm. I am now in the process of getting my own farm up and running, but this transition has made me think deeply about supporting the rights of farm workers and how I don't want to abandon this struggle even after becoming a farm owner. I'd love to hear you and other farmers' thoughts on this," end quote. Okay, so John does have a second part of this question that has nothing to do with employees that we're going to save that for the third segment. But let's just talk about this idea of employees and treating them well and all those good things, because I agree that this is both an under-discussed and underappreciated aspect of running a farm business. And I hear so many people complain about how hard it is to find labor. The reality is, farm labor is really difficult. And as farmers, we tend to forget that. We get used to, farming and the difficulties and the weather and all the things, and we assume everyone who follows will easily slide right into this work. I was in decent shape when I started farming, and it still completely kicked my butt. It's easy to forget that. Those first few weeks were really hard. So for me, being a good farm boss starts with a slow, thoughtful integration. Allow them to slowly build the requisite muscle and endurance by not forcing too much on them all at once. Balance out your tasks for them for the first few weeks between some laborious stuff like planting, some standing stuff like cultivating, and some less intensive physical stuff like washing and packing or, doing seeding or any of that sort of stuff. As a once farm employee, think about those experiences and what would have helped you or dismayed you. Maybe you kind of keep some extra gloves and straw hats on hand to provide them when they don't have their own or they forget their own. Maybe provide some snacks as well for fuel, extra water. Again, it's easy to forget how incredibly difficult and demanding this job is, and how nice it is to just have a break and kind of sit there and chat in the shade. It's really hard to pay what is actually deserved for doing this sort of work as well. We always provided lunch to our employee to help compensate a little bit. Having lunch together was also a nice respite and a way for them to feel a part of what we're doing, and also for us to kind of learn about their lives and become a little closer. I also think paying them a salary versus like any sort of hourly wage is a good thing to think about. We paid our last employee a weekly salary. They never worked overtime. time, and we often let them go early when the weather, sucked or was too hot or too rainy or whatever, so long as we got the list done. Rarely did they ever work a full 40 hours either. And knowing that if they got their list done, they could go home early meant they often, would work a little faster and a little harder without feeling like I was pushing them too much. And on the salary side, that helps them to budget. It takes that pressure of feeling like they have to work through the heat or they have to work through the rain or whatever it is that they don't necessarily have to off of their shoulders, because they know at the end of the week they're getting the money that they earned. Oftentimes we would finish up early so we could both be done by 2 or 3 p.m. and then just get the heck out of the heat. As for the trading living space as part of the compensation thing, I get that, but I'm not a big fan of it. I think owners should lease the space separately and pay the worker adequately for the reasons that you stated. Having your living space tied into your work environment can make someone with very little power or money feel stuck. Now, not everybody's going to agree with that. Not every farm worker is necessarily going to agree with that, but I feel like you just don't want to put somebody in a position they feel like they have to stay because that's where they live and that's where all of their stuff is. Now, I should say employment is just a weird concept in general to me, so I'm not always super sympathetic about it. Asking someone to do extremely hard work to help make you money has just never really sat right with me, especially in something like farming where the work is so incredibly taxing. I think this is part of what attracts me more and more to the idea of collaborative farming models, such as dual partnerships or co-ops and whatever. It's shared risk, but it's also shared labor with a common goal in mind. It's a shared sense of propriety. I don't think it necessarily has to go all the way to the point that every farm worker is going to want to own a part of the farm business, but I do know that labor is increasingly hard to come by, so incentivizing it and thinking of it beyond just labor is really important. Asking someone to farm for you is a huge ask, even when it comes with money. So I think every farmer and business owner needs to keep that in mind and get creative. Anyway, maybe there's something helpful in there. Maybe not. I don't know. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break and we'll get a second part of that question in the next segment. But first, a quick word from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. All right, so we're continuing on with Papa John Misty's other part of their question here in the third segment, and that is, quote, now that my long-winded comment is out of the way, do you have any tips for managing black widows in a greenhouse? I just found and killed 3, but I'm concerned there may be more. While I recognize they can be beneficial, I don't think that outweighs the risk they pose to our younger and older family members who may come in contact with them. Thank you so much for all that you do. This is such a great channel, end quote. Okay, first, thank you. And funny story that sort of ties in, both your question here and your comment together, is that several years ago when Hannah and I were moving from our old farm to this farm now that we're living on, we had this greenhouse with large water barrels that we've filled with water, and then they helped us to retain, some of the heat over the winter. And black widows absolutely freaking loved those barrels. I think we had 14 barrels or something, and there was at least one black widow on each one. And here's the thing. Yes, black widows are venomous. They create a neurotoxin that can severely damage nerves if they bite you and can even cause aches and pains throughout your body. It is exceedingly rare that anyone will die of a black widow bite, but according to clinicians, their bite can certainly cause a lot of pain, nausea, discomfort, spasms, etc. So if you do get a bite, go see a doctor, but also try not to get a bite. In other words, it's bad, but it's not like a copperhead or rattlesnake bad. For most people, it's probably just going to be really, really uncomfortable. Anyway, I have generally always viewed them as beneficial and not to mention incredibly attractive. I think they are without question the most beautiful spider, but I've digressed a lot here. Because that year we were actually having some folks help us move the farm. They were experienced farm workers and were helping me to establish our garden beds on the new farm, and also for a little while clean up the old farm. But part of that job was just dumping those barrels of water out so we could move them. And the helpers were certainly, and to some extent rightly, freaked out a little bit by the presence of black widows. And I have always regretted the sort of nonchalance with which I treated that situation, because I was very used to dealing with these spiders, which are largely harmless so long as you have gloves on. I should have been more considerate of their concerns working around them, and that's always kind of haunted me a little bit, and I don't know, I think about that. Now, in terms of managing these spiders, though, and frankly, most venomous spiders, that's really going to come down to stripping the greenhouse this winter and cleaning out any spiders and egg sacs that you have around. Most of the venomous spiders out there, at least here in the U.S., are fans of tiny untouched, spaces and crevices that are not disturbed very often. So cleaning those up and filling them, maybe some of those crevices in with caulk or something will help to give reduce their habitat. I love seeing the black widows for their benefits, but I get it. You don't want any sort of youngin or anyone who may be immunocompromised accidentally getting bit. That would not be great. After we cleaned out that greenhouse and moved it over, we have not had any black widows in the greenhouse that I have found, which, to be honest, it's a little bit of a bummer, but we do have other spiders, so it's all good there. Now, there may be some sprays and such that you could use, but it largely comes down to your tolerance for those things. And also for black widows, it largely comes down to habitat. They like it in dark and little tiny crevices that aren't disturbed. Fill in those and eliminate those areas, and that will help a lot. You can usually spot their webs too, which tend to be thick and small, and then you can carefully find them that way. There may also be glue traps that you can use in the more problematic areas. Anyway, I hope something in there was helpful. Biodiversity can be complicated like that. All right. Otherwise, I think we are done here Friday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Let's call it the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music that you all have been covering. Keep those coming. And to Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, not this Louisville Racing one, but shouts to Louisville Racing who play tonight to try and stay in the playoff race. Pick up a hat like the No Till Growers hats that Mike's putting on the screen, or my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of September, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Jacob Schwab, Kim Meyer, Clint Bingham. That's a fun one. And Patrick Weaver. All right, so you will remember that our hiker Pat has just woken up and found that it is once again Friday, and it's 8 a.m. and thus almost time to go to work. So Pat gets up, confused about how all of a sudden the day just started over, and then walks out of the room, and a nice lady in the hallway of the building says a hearty good morning to Pat, and Pat says they can't talk right now because they're running late for work and all that stuff, but is polite, and Pat heads to the cafeteria down the hall, and the lady, looks at her colleague and says, "Wow, that was a close one this time. I still don't entirely understand how Pat gets out. Must have been all those years of climbing and hiking, I suppose. Gave Pat some skills." Then the two nurses watch as Pat shuffles around the cafeteria, picking up trays, putting them down listlessly, working. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. You all have a great weekend. We will see you on Monday. Bye.